Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series, The Human from a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 38. High Chief Ulamark, Adventurer Level NA, Orc Kokenian.
They're in Blurpress?
I asked it incredulously.
Not Yerna.
Great Chief Torman nodded gravely. The greying orc in front of me had ridden night and day to bring me the news himself and beg my aid. Quite a feat for one in his advanced years, but he had done so to make certain that I would not decline his request. He had given of himself to ask me to do the same, and it would be the highest form of disrespect to ignore this. Of course, I had no intention of ignoring or declining his request, but the fact that he rode here himself suggests that he thinks otherwise, which means I need to make it clearer to my great chiefs that I stand with them. Their struggles are my struggles. This line of thought must have shown on my face because Tormund gave me a knowing look. Ulamark, I rode here myself because my harnasses are faster than the scouts, and I don't trust anyone but myself and my son with my harnasses. Since I'm too old for the field, I sent him to lead and came here myself.
Get out of my head, I grinned. I'll send them regulars and redirect our allies. How's your boy doing?
He's had better days, I'm sure, Tormund sighed. Wants to be an artist, not a general. His paintings and sculptures are fine to look at, too. He really cares about his craft. The look on his face when I told him what was required of him was grin.
He didn't argue?
No. Grum's a smart boy. He knows that if he doesn't take charge, there's a good chance that many of our people will lose their homes and their lives. He won't allow his aversion to responsibility to cause our people to suffer.
I'm glad to hear that. How's things on the front?
They've captured a settlement in a village. Rofen must have finally sent a competent commander, because they're using shield walls and pikes, and we haven't won a single skirmish. They won't pursue us either, so our traps and tricks have been ineffective. The best we've been able to do is convince them to pull back. The mention of shield walls made the hairs on the back of my neck raise. I'd been hoping that I was wrong about the vampires, but phalanxes are one of their favorite formations. It could be a coincidence, but this along with the fact that the drow aren't sticking to any of their patterns is alarming. Tormund noted my silence and thoughtful expression. You don't think? His eyes went wide as he trailed off. Hey, it can't be the vampires, can it? How could they have infiltrated Lofin's inner circle? Tormund is old enough that he was raised in stories of his fathers fighting against the vampires of the Night Kingdom. He had even personally led the charge against the remnants that threatened our borders. Of all the great chiefs, he was uniquely qualified to know how dire a threat the vampires can be.
I don't know, but it's not outside the realm of possibilities, I said. Lofin's paranoid, but he's also an idiot. His criteria for choosing his generals is well known, and it wouldn't be hard to take advantage of that.
But how can this be? Drow can't be turned, and there isn't a single non-Drow noble in the entirety of the Night Kingdom. Lofin's not stupid enough to make a vampire his general, right?
I don't have answers. It could be the Drow in question is simply working with the vampires, or it could be that Lofin couldn't find a general amongst his nobility and hired a mercenary. Regardless, something is definitely off about this invasion. Have there been any reports of vampires in the field?
No, none at all.
There's that, at least, I said as I rubbed my chin. So either I'm wrong about my hunch that the vampires are at work here, or Lofin is unaware of the vampiric influence of his invasion.
One of his dead, Tormund asked.
Can't be. One, I would have heard about it. Lofin doesn't pay his staff well enough to keep their silence. Two, there is a functional drow army. The nobility of the Night Kingdom wouldn't be able to pull that off without Lofin. Those strings are too fragile for vampires to be able to yank them.
It's a mystery, Tormund sighed and leaned back in his chair. Still, doesn't change what must be done. Blurpress must be defended. What are we going to do about their shields?
Shields won't help them if they attack your keep. But for a field, we may want to look into a mounted mages, I suggested. Or axes. Axes would probably be cheaper.
They're using pikes and spears. The axes have trouble closing in. I like the idea of the mage cavalry, though.
Yeah, but we don't really have the infrastructure for that sort of thing.
The guilds might. They've got to know some adventurers that can use magic and ride harnesses.
Sure, but it's going to be costly. Won't be a long-term solution to this kind of combat. Can't expect this to be a quick war.
Tormund laughed. You should use that overly large head of yours to find a way to encourage mages to join the regulars. Then we wouldn't have to worry about this kind of thing.
My head isn't overly large, old one. Yours is just small.
I grinned. Then a thought occurred to me.
Magic users like to study and learn.
It helps them with their casting. Maybe a school or something.
Charge tuition and offer waivers for military service.
The guilds would probably have an interest in that. Might even be willing to pay extra taxes to help fund it. See? Big head, big ideas.
Raisin!
I shouted, ignoring the jab from Tormund. Raisin quickly popped his head through my door. Yes, hi, Chief.
I need a meeting with the leaders of the adventurers guilds and companies. If they want to continue operating in the unified chiefdoms, they better get here with speed.
Raisin nodded and closed the door. Tormund raised an eyebrow at me and then grinned. You'd banned them, he asked.
Damn right, I replied. Most of them are tax dodgers anyway. All I gotta do is send the auditors and they're done. They're well aware of that.
Tormund nodded and chuckled. The truth is, most of the guild leaders are respectful and will come regardless of whether or not I make threats. While it is true that the majority of them definitely do not pay their legally obligated share of taxes, they still understand their place in the world. A handful of them, though, do not. They keep forgetting that their wealth does not equate to status here in the unified chiefdoms, and Kokena especially. If I didn't threaten them, they would ignore me. This would force me to do some rather unsavory things to teach whoever replaces them not to repeat their mistakes. My father once told me that if I could avoid being cruel, then I should do so at all costs. Fear naturally follows respect, but respect does not follow fear. He generally knew what he was talking about in regards to governing, so it's advice that I heed.
School for magic, Tormund said thoughtfully. How long do you suppose it'll take to make? That depends almost entirely upon the mages, I replied. We've got some empty buildings that would do the trick. The Uli Trade Union building is what I'm thinking of.
The Uli finally gave up the coast. Thought I'd never see the day.
Yeah, they've been done for a while now. Thankfully, it was a slow decline, so it didn't hurt the economy too much when the boys shut the doors.
The Uli Trade Union had been a multinational trade organization that began a long, long time ago. My great-grandfather had given the seal of approval for the construction of the gigantic office. A series of scandals and bad business decisions had started their decline during my father's time, and I had signed the paperwork that forgave their debts and closed their doors.
What are the Uli boys up to these days? I don't know. Part of their debt forgiveness was the requirement that they forfeit their property and leave the chiefdom. They didn't tell me where they planned to go.
Tormund snapped his knees.
So one more thing before I go. You met with the thing they dragged out of the dungeon? Sure did, I grinned. He's a human.
A human? What's that?
Well, looks kind of like an elf, but with round ears and a few sharp teeth. Didn't really get a chance to talk to him very much because I had him deliver a missive to Bolasar to request aid against the drow. The reports say that he's from another world, and that world is full of humans like him. Oh, and they can eat meat and veg.
Weird, Tormund frowned. You sent him to Bolasar by himself. He's that strong?
Guild says he's a level 7 already, but no. I sent him along with Flesh Carver Yilda's boys. Nash and York. She adopted the human, you know.
No shit, Tormund laughed. Haven't heard from Yilda Alta in decades. Any word on how she's doing?
From the sound of things, she's enjoying the quiet life. Can't begrudge her that. Not after what she gave for it.
Too true. So the human, think he's dangerous?
Probably, but not to us. He seems pretty amicable and level-headed.
That's good to hear, Tormund said as he rose from his chair. So long as you've got some idea as to what you're doing with the human, I'm fine with whatever you decide. I should get back. I nodded solemnly as he turned to leave my office. He paused for a moment at the door.
Should I accompany you?
I asked, trying to guess the reason for his hesitation. He turned to look at me with a little bit of shock. I suppose I'd guessed wrong, and it hadn't even occurred to him to ask. My prowess on the battlefield is well known, and even though Tormund and the rest of the great chiefs are big orcs, I tower over them. Tormund met my eyes and then looked at the mountains of paperwork on my desk.
I don't think so, Illamark, he answered with a grin. Things are not quite so dire as to give you an excuse to get away from the paperwork. But there's just so much of it, though, I said with an exaggerated frown. Tormund and I laughed for a few moments before things settled down into a somber silence. When you enter the field of battle, it'll be indicative of failure on our part, Tormund said. We'll do everything in our power to ensure that you get to enjoy your paperwork. Goodbye, High Chief. Goodbye, Great Chief. Tormund left the room, and I sighed. I'd known Tormund since I was a child, and it pained me to see him as an elder now. The massive orc that had sparred with me and shocked me with his speed and power was now too old to even accompany his son into battle. Still, I felt a little beam of pride that he liked my idea for a magic school. Maybe we could have more than one, and have the schools compete with each other to further motivate their students. No, I doubt there'd be any need for that. The knowledge of the magic alone will be more than enough motivation for most students. Hell, maybe once things get going, I'll take a class or two. Find out if I could have been good at magic or not. My gaze fell back on my paperwork. Fuck! I whispered to myself as I picked up my pen. A knock on my office door saved me from the looming task at hand. Raisin poked his head into my office. Hi, Chief, 2 of the guild leaders are here to see you, he said. Which ones? I asked. Pumas and the Adventurers Guild. Send them in. No need for introductions. Raisin nodded and left the room. The Adventurers Guild and Pumas Union were the 2 largest guilds in the Unified Chiefdoms. The Adventurers Guild was much larger than the Pumas Union, though, because their operation was multinational. Even so, the Pumas Union was no pushover and even offered mercenary services that the AG didn't typically bother with. There are a lot of areas in the UC that wouldn't have any sort of police if it weren't for Pumas, and the easiest way to become a guard is to join up with them. A gnome and an elf entered my office and bowed. The gnome is Melura Grisnell, and she is the head of the Pumas Union. The elf is Jirway Horfu, and he is the master of the Adventurers Guild. I gestured for them to take a seat, and they happily complied. There are 2 things we need to discuss, I said once they were settled. They subtly glanced at each other. I could imagine what they might think of this meeting about, and how nervous they both were. I had to fight a grin. First is the situation with the Night Kingdom invasion. I need mages that know how to ride harnesses while casting. They will be pressed into service for the remainder of the invasion, but they will be well compensated for their efforts. Eyes widened and eyebrows shot up. It had been decades since adventurers had been drafted, and my willingness to impose upon their freedoms indicated a dire situation. Melura opened her mouth to say something, but quickly closed it again. It'll be done, High Chief. Jirway said. So the rumors are true then? I don't know what the rumors are, so I cannot say, I replied. What I can say is that the Drow are using tactics that we are ill-prepared to respond to, and they invaded Blurpus instead of Vienna. We are planning on utilizing a mage cavalry force to tip things in our favor. Mounted mages, I'll be damned, Melura said. The second thing we need to discuss is the possibility of a school for study of magic. It'll be an academic institution dedicated to instructing mages on the magical arts, both to further the common knowledge of magic as well as to bolster the caliber of our mages. Funding will be done through a mixture of government subsidies and tuition, with tuition waivers offered by completion of military service. The 2 guild leaders maintained their shocked expressions. Whatever they had thought this meeting to be about, I was demolishing their expectations. Melura covered first this time. How can we help, High Chief? She asked. I need teachers and administrators that are well-versed in magic. It is unclear how many we will need as of yet, so I want you to make a list of those who are qualified and who may be interested. You said government subsidy, High Chief. How will the chieftain be getting the funds necessary to start this, Academy of Magic? Jirway asked. Oh, that's quite simple, I said as a malicious grin spread across my features. I'll just be needing you to pay a bit more of your fair share of taxes. Some estimates put your payment at around 30% of what you should actually be paying. If you bump that up to 40%, we'll be able to afford the academy, and I won't have to send the auditors. Their stunned silence was music to my ears. End of chapter. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters,
Bushmaster117, Casper Arnholtz, Dragzoon W.R.E, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, Jon Carrington, and Sevaren Serberous. Thank you very much.